These are the first images the Special Operations Forces have released only today. They were filmed long before the start of the Kursk operation. The preparation began almost 3 months earlier. To cover about 1,000 kilometers in the border area, study the terrain, clear routes of mines, and create passages. All this so that on August 6, 2024, units of the Defense Forces of Ukraine could break through the state border near the city of Sudzha and rapidly advance deep into the Russian Federation to protect the Sumy and Kharkiv regions from a potential enemy offensive. The Russian command reacted. This is exactly what the armed forces of Ukraine were counting on. The enemy redeployed reserves from other sectors of the front, tens of thousands of soldiers here to the Sudzha area. Airborne troops, Marines, Special Forces. At the end of 24, the occupiers involved soldiers from North Korea in combat operations. It was about 12,000 soldiers, many of whom were killed or wounded. Hundreds of units of destroyed enemy armored vehicles, artillery, and other enemy weapons. These are the results of the operation. In addition, a significant number of captured occupiers have replenished the exchange fund. And although in March of 2025, Ukrainian units completed this mission and withdrew from most of the occupied positions, the Kursk campaign entered modern military history as one of the most audacious and large-scale maneuvers of the armed forces of Ukraine on enemy territory.
However, Ukraine is not just waiting and hoping. The tactic of precise deep strikes is perhaps the most powerful tool for influencing Moscow. In the Russian city of Yaroslavl, a local oil refinery is ablaze today following a drone attack. The successful attack on the oil refinery was confirmed by the President of Ukraine and the General Staff of the Armed Forces, while the regional governor called the drone strike the most massive one and reported that the highway in the direction of Moscow has been temporarily closed. The attacked Novoyaroslav. The Novoyaroslavl oil refinery processes about 15 million tons of oil annually and is among the 5 largest in Russia. The enterprise produces automotive gasoline, diesel fuel, aviation gas, jet fuel, and lubricants, including those for the Russian military. The plant is located 800 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Immediately after the strike, kilometer-long queues formed at local gas stations.
Good morning, everyone. This is the oil refinery. Many of you have probably heard what was happening here with us tonight until this morning. And all of this will be our air today, tomorrow, and in the days to come. Not to mention other issues.
As for the strikes on Wildberry's warehouses, one could already study the geography of Russia based on them. Let me remind you, this is a marketplace where, among other things, military-purpose goods are stored and sold. It is still too early to calculate the final statistics of the destruction and damages. This is a huge network with hundreds of thousands of square meters of space. Each logistics hub suffers varying degrees of damage. Besides, attacks are happening almost daily, and therefore all the figures are constantly changing. But the map of the strikes can already be assessed now. We have visualized it in our infographic. Since mid-July, the logistics network of the largest Russian marketplace, Wildberries, has been regularly attacked by drones. At least 18 of the company's branches have come under fire, including those in the Moscow region and near St. Petersburg. The geography of the strikes covered a vast territory, from the Leningrad region in the northwest to the Volga region, the Urals, and the southern regions of the Russian Federation. Most of the warehouses burned to the ground, and 5 others sustained damage. The potential losses for sellers operating through this platform could reach $3.5 billion. However, the attacks did not stop. Just since the beginning of this week, fires have broken out at Wildberries facilities in the Vladimir, Samara, Tver, and Leningrad regions, as well as near Moscow. However, it is not just Wildberries. Oil refineries engulfed in flames destroyed strategic bombers, hit airfields, air defense systems, warships, and shadow fleet tankers. All of this is the result of a 40-day operation by the SBU on the instructions of the President of Ukraine. How did one of the most large-scale campaigns to dismantle Russia's military and economic potential take place? And how exactly are systematic strikes deep behind Russian lines and on temporarily occupied territories changing the capabilities of the Russian army? Watch in the report.
The oil refinery in Perm, one of the largest in Russia, located 1,500 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, flared up like a match after the work of SBU long-range drones. This is just one vivid result of the security service of Ukraine's work within a 40-day operation. On July 25th, the president of Ukraine approved it to urge Russia to stop the war.
Damn it, man. It seems like something hit somewhere after all.
In 40 days, SBU drones hit over 100 strategic targets in the enemy's rear. These are military enterprises, oil refineries, air bases, warships, and tankers of Russia's shadow fleet, plus more than 20,000 other targets on the front line.
In terms of intensity, geography, and the number of simultaneously struck strategic targets, this operation has become an effective mechanism for influencing the aggressor state.
And now, more details. Over 40 days, the SBU successfully attacked a number of military airfields in Russia and in temporarily occupied Crimea. In particular, the Engels airfield, one of the main bases for strategic aviation that the enemy army systematically uses for massive shelling of Ukraine, was hit several times. It is known that a Tu-95 bomber was destroyed there. Its tail section was blown off.
To be specific, if we take the iconic Tu-95 strategic bomber as a prime example, the total production and operational cost of a single unit could have been as high as $100 million, which is a staggering figure for that era. It is also worth considering that the supply of these aircraft in Russia is significantly limited, and their number is only a few dozen units, despite the fact that at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, according to various estimates, Russia had between 40 and 50 of these Tu-95s.
And that is not the entire list of destroyed aircraft.
The damage to 2 Su-35 fighter jets and 2 L-39 combat trainer aircraft has been confirmed. A hangar with Su-24, Su-30 and Su-30 SM aircraft was hit, as well as hangars with Shahed drones and the fuel infrastructure of the airfields.
The SBU did not overlook the oil industry of the occupying country either. Drones attacked important linear production and dispatch stations, and on August 1st, 3 oil refineries in Ufa exploded. This is the Republic of Bashkortostan, 1,600 kilometers from the Ukrainian border.
Oh, it's burning really, really badly over there.
Hitting oil refineries is precisely direct economic damage to the Russian war machine, to the Russian budget from which they finance this war. Actually, these strikes on these facilities caused the greatest damage to Russia's economy. That is, it's not just the inability to sell oil exports or, say, exports of oil products, gasoline, diesel, kerosene, and so on, but it's also a direct fuel shortage within the territory of Russia.
Special forces of the SBU and other defense units which systematically destroy the occupiers' fleet in the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea provided support. Over the course of the 40-day operation, Ukrainian forces attacked enemy tankers and cargo ships that were under international sanctions.
This is where the Russians might really run into problems because it is quite difficult to replace tankers and dry cargo ships. They are firstly expensive, and secondly they need to be bought or found somewhere. This is the component that will probably be the hardest for the Russians to restore for now. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, there have already been reports from Russian media that the Russians are seeing a drop in coal exports because there simply aren't enough dry cargo ships to transport this coal by sea.
In other words, these strikes that Ukraine carried out on Russian territory had such a complex effect. They were more aimed at reducing Russia's capabilities to wage war, both by exhausting it economically and by reducing logistical capabilities, because as we know, the enemy has been building certain logistical chains for years, particularly in the temporarily occupied territories, as well as in temporarily occupied Crimea.
In 40 days, the security service of Ukraine has sung off and neutralized quite a few Russian air defense systems, dozens of tankers, armored vehicles, artillery pieces, and multiple launch rocket systems. All of this amounts to billions in losses for the aggressor country. But it's not just money that matters.
The Russians were forced to actively prepare for these strikes, trying to understand their logic, trying to figure out exactly which objects would end up in the crosshairs of our drones and to defend them accordingly. By doing this, and by utilizing this specific term, let's say a certain palpable sense of panic was effectively created within Russia. The direct and immediate result of this widespread anxiety was the forced dispersal of their air defense systems. This was not merely limited to those specific objects and locations that are truly critical for the Russian Federation and which had been under significant threat during previous periods, but rather it extended far beyond those initial parameters.
The occupiers' critical facilities are under threat in the future. If 40 days of insane losses were not enough for the Kremlin to realize that this war is primarily not profitable for Russia itself, the operation will be continued. This is a new directive from the President to the Security Service of Ukraine.
We have determined the priorities for August. I am grateful to the SBU for their strong positions. Today there is already a report from the Ministry of Defense on the destruction of Russians on the front line in July. The Alpha unit of the Security Service of Ukraine is number 1 in terms of strikes. They achieved the most. Simply well done.
And so the 40-day operation is going beyond the set deadlines and likely is becoming indefinite. New loud results are coming soon. Veronika Ivashenko details, Inter-TV channel, Marathon, United News.
40 days of tactical success. This is how military experts assess the operation to force Russia into peace, and what do political analysts say? Has this campaign changed the Kremlin's behavior? What should we expect from the aggressor? A new mobilization, even larger-scale strikes, or perhaps a search for a path to negotiations? Irina Ivanova found out.
More than 100 strikes on the enemy's critical facilities. Oil refineries, military airfields, and giant warehouses have been hit.
Billions in losses for the economy and growing tension within society. Despite these consequences, the Kremlin regime shows no desire to seek peace, says Roland Freudenstein, founder of the advocacy platform Brussels Freedom Hub.
Putin's demands, in essence, have remained completely unchanged since the very beginning of the full-scale invasion. So the situation has effectively not changed. Ukraine is achieving greater success in carrying out deep strikes and is conducting diplomatic work more effectively. And in my opinion, Western sanctions are starting to really take their toll. But all of this has not yet led to a change in Putin's attitude.
Putin is driven to continue the war by a firm belief in Russia's military superiority on the battlefield, the expert is convinced. Even if the generals are feeding him false reports. In addition, the Kremlin leader sees Russia's advantage in ballistic strikes, against which Ukraine has no interceptors, as well as in the successful continuation of the hybrid war in Europe. Unknown drones continue to be spotted in EU countries. Russia has targeted Ukraine's economic capacity and is striking merchant ships in the Black Sea. It is quite possible, the expert suggests, that the aggressor will intensify strikes before winter to provoke a refugee crisis in Europe.
Putin believes that this will be enough to cause a large-scale energy crisis in Ukraine next winter, that new waves of refugees will then begin, Europe will lose its unity, and Ukrainians themselves will demand peace or something like that.
In the fall, the Kremlin may carry out mobilization, but it is unlikely to be open, as it was in 2022, according to analysts at the Institute for the Study of War. At the beginning of July, they voiced their assessments. The Russian authorities are preparing all the conditions for a possible mobilization. Ronald Freudenstein does not rule out that the aggressor may go even further.
Another option would be a significantly strong escalation, attacks on the Ukrainian government, or even the use of tactical nuclear weapons. I don't think that is planned at the moment. Russia is skillfully speculating on this topic to intimidate the West, but one cannot rule out that we might reach that point someday. However, Putin would be making a fatal mistake if he truly counted on breaking Ukraine. That will not happen.
According to the expert, Ukraine should not abandon its efforts in both long-range strikes and diplomatic circles. In his words, the attempts to achieve peace unite Europe around Ukraine and keep the United States close. Volodymyr Zelensky also supports this strategy.
Right now, we cannot predict with 100% certainty when all our diplomatic efforts will work, when Ukraine's long-range sanctions against Russia, when our strikes and all the partner sanctions will reach exactly the level of pressure where Russia has no other alternative but peace. We will try very hard to make this happen, to make it happen before winter, in the autumn. But we clearly understand who we are dealing with and that Putin hopes to drag out this war even further.
At the same time, the expert advises not to get attached to a specific date, but instead to move towards one's goal and use all tools to mobilize efforts.